Hello, and welcome to the Hello You Show, where we talk about big dreams and taking real action. Through transformative stories, a bit of neuroscience, and real conversations, this show is here to help you explore creating your next level life with authenticity and passion. I'm Jessica Rice, a design techie and former engineering leader turned vision evolution coach on a mission to help other women rise up and lead a life of purpose. So get cozy and say hello again to the real you. Hello. Welcome back to the Hello You Show. My name is Jessica Rice, and I am your host. And today I want to be talking a little bit about a topic that it comes up all the time, and it's very near and dear to my heart because I have suffered from this, but it is probably one of the most insidious challenges that I think that we can face sometimes, and that is being a people pleaser and using this as an act of service. So I'll explain more about that in this episode, but I really felt that it was important to really dive into this a little bit more, talk about those ugly little truths, those things that come up for us. And then also talk about what are some strategies that we can then enact to get out of this mode, this desperate mode, to have everybody else like us, appreciate us, value us, when we don't see it even for ourselves. And we are so focused on external recognition that is to the detriment of our own progress on our goals, our ideas, our creative endeavors, and most of the time in our careers. So what is people pleasing? Well, oftentimes this is something that comes up starting way back in childhood. We have this very root behavior that comes into play, and it's this unmet need and trained response that we have as children. So this precondition is something that we've learned to take on as a way to either get what we want out of life or to make life less uncomfortable. And so what do I mean by that? According to Google, if you look at Google, people-pleasing often stems from these childhood experiences where individuals learn to prioritize other people's needs above their own in order to gain love, acceptance, avoid conflict. And it's often due to parenting styles that, I'm going to say, overemphasize obedience to where they feel they need to cater to a parent's emotional needs. And it can also be influenced by social conditioning where we have to be agreeable, accommodating, and it leads to this fear of rejection or disapproval if we do not please others. So where is the challenge in this? Well, number one, we are continually then putting other people before ourselves, but we are doing it in a very sneaky and subtle sort of way. Because in effect, people pleasing is also an avoidance tactic for dealing with ourselves. We don't have to face ourselves. The more we pile on, the more we take on, the more we say yes to all of these different things, the less we have to face ourselves, the less we have to deal with that underlying root problem and what's truly going on under the surface. And so we can say that we're afraid of letting other people down. I've had a client recently tell me that she felt like she didn't deserve to set time aside for herself. She felt selfish as a leader of an organization, a very prominent organization. She felt guilty for requiring additional time for herself, for thinking time to do her job. But oftentimes we are avoiding having to sit with ourselves and be okay with it, our decisions, and truly our own limitations. What happens then if we're running a company, leading an organization, a team? We're responsible for more than just ourselves. And we are not setting aside the appropriate boundaries. We're not setting healthy expectations. How are we then leading effectively? How are we then setting an example then for others? How are we reaching our goals if all we're doing is taking on more and more and more? So when we fall into the trap of people pleasing, there's these couple of things that start to happen. Number one, we don't know how to get out of it. People start to expect us to show up in this capacity over and over again. And they stop respecting our time. They stop valuing our time because they're looking at us as always being present, always being available, always willingly taking on more. And then we feel guilty by setting down a boundary because we've already laid this precedence down that we're always available. But however, if we set the right boundaries and restrictions on our time and capacity, then we have the capability of truly prioritizing, truly goal setting, truly valuing ourselves and our time. Now, I do a lot of work with clients around this, dealing with positive intelligence, going through the assessment, understanding what are some of these root saboteurs that come up for people. Pleaser is a very big one that comes up for many people, along with overachiever and avoider and controller and hyper vigilant and all these other ones. But I wanted to read off a little bit about from what positive intelligence tells us about being a pleaser. So, number one, pleasers are wonderful. They have these amazing strengths about them in the terms of having greater empathy, being capable of loving and giving, tuning into other people's feelings and needs. They are emotionally self-aware, and they have the potential for higher emotional intelligence. What happens is this strong need to be liked, to attempt to earn it by people pleasing or rescuing them or flattering them, is it becomes this mode of operation, this habit in which we build our lives around. And so then, therefore, we are unable to express our own needs openly and directly. And so we do so indirectly by having people feel obligated to even reciprocate this care. And so we can come across as really needy. We could even be forceful or intrusive. And we can start to feel upset. What I want to say, lacking the words, we can feel resentful. We start to feel resentful. That was the word I was looking for. Because we feel in this constant conflict, this push and pull internally that nobody else sees, where we can't express ourselves directly. And so we feel selfish. And we're worried about insisting that our needs are driving other people away. But at the same time, this neediness, this constant need for validation, this feeling resentful, this finding other ways that we feel reciprocated, that is the crux of our issue. That is our problem. And so it can start to truly impact our relationships, our work, our careers, because we're not looking at everything from this zoomed out lens. We are not looking at it from a healthy perspective, or what he considers the sage perspective. So how do we get out from under this? How do we start? I lost my notes because I needed some notes today, just honesty. And I wrote them out. But how do we start to there? The trappings of a very highly projective, neurodivergent mind. So how do we get out of this situation of people pleasing? Well, we have to, number one, contend with ourselves. We have to, number one, recognize what it is that's happening, what's going on for us, and have the self-awareness, which we're capable of. But we have to do so without judgment. We have to do so by truly honoring ourselves and loving ourselves first, valuing ourselves over other people's opinions, valuing what it is that we bring, and truly recognizing that. we can't carry out higher level responsibilities or goals for ourselves or our companies if we're not able to prioritize accurately. Second thing is that we have to start shifting our expectations of ourselves. Sometimes we start to think that we can take it all on, that we can do everything. Maybe we've had success in the past by doing this, and it's just created this greater crutch for ourselves because now we've learned how to be that overachiever and a pleaser at the same time, and it seemed to be working well for us so far. But there's limitations to that. There's limitations to everything. And so when we start to shift our expectations, what we then have to build in are buffers around our time and being more pragmatic with how we use our energy. And a good way that you can start to do this is to truly start tracking how you use your time. How long is it taking you to accomplish various tasks? How many meetings are coming into play? And what are those little sneaky, pesky distractions that sometimes get in the way that are hidden, that we forget about even? Start being diligent in how you're tracking the use of your time so that you understand how then to set realistic expectations for yourself and for others and for projections that you're having to do within your role. The third thing to consider is then truly, how do we start setting those boundaries? How do we start to set boundaries and expectations for ourselves? So according to Shirzad, if we're looking at the sage perspective, it's the area of the brain where positive emotions, peace, calm, clear-headed focus, creativity, big picture thinking resides. If we're considering this, then we can start to think about how setting expectations, how pushing back potentially, how creating healthy boundaries can really be a gift or an opportunity that we are creating not only for ourselves, but for the situation that we are in. And so we're in this kind of, they consider it like this fork in the road for our neural pathways. We might normally go down one where our automatic assumption or reaction is like, oh, this is bad. I can't push back. I can't say no. What are they going to think of me? All of these other things. But at that moment, it's challenging yourself to look at it as a gift. What new perspective can you take on where you're looking for the gift in the scenario? You're looking for the opportunity. You are looking for the silver lining and that rainbow on the other side. And ask yourself questions. Which perspective is true? Is it bad to push back? Is it bad to say no? Is it bad to set boundaries? Or is it a gift? Because the answer is that whichever one you believe will be true. And know that. So if you're going to look at the gifts, understand there's three gifts. There's knowledge, there's power, and there's inspiration. So you could ask yourself in gift number one for knowledge, what knowledge would I need to gain so that the payoff in the future could be that much larger than what it's costing me now? What is the gain here? What you can gain from this experience and finally setting some healthy boundaries for yourself. Number two, power. You can see the problem as a weight in the gym where you're now flexing your muscles and you're growing them. So which mental muscle or power must you grow in order to handle this situation? And what is the gift of that particular power continuing to grow? And then gift number three is inspiration. Committing to an inspiring action that you wouldn't have had if this quote unquote bad thing had not happened. If you didn't have to push back, what's the gift that's on the other side of that? That action is the gift. And so that's an example of one way that you can look at it. The other thing is thinking truly about true priorities. As a leader, If you were required to carry out a specific amount of tasks or deadlines or priorities or leading or engagement, if you're saying yes to everything, if you're not pushing back, if you're people pleasing all of the time, how are you then going to accomplish the things that you set out to do? See, we assume that when we push back that people think then that we're saying no. And no doesn't have to mean no. It can mean not right now. It can mean maybe we can plan a time next week, or here are the hours that I'm available. It can also mean asking really important questions. What priority is this ask in relation to these deadlines or the organization's mission or the vision or the strategic plan that we've enacted, or whatever that looks like? How will this impact the goals and those deadlines that I'm trying to meet or my team is trying to meet? Is it furthering the cause? And start getting really deliberate about understanding that we don't have to drop everything just because we're asked to do so. We can stop, pause, and reflect to determine if this is truly the best course of action at this moment, or how then do we proceed and where that it makes sense for all parties involved. And sometimes it truly is a no. Sometimes it has to be a no. When we start to set those boundaries, however, people actually learn to start respecting us and your time, and they value you, and they understand that you have limitations, and that they might understand that you actually have more important things going on, more pressing matters that you're tending to beyond their present visibility into your circumstances. Because again, we're assuming that people sometimes understand all that's on our plate when they don't. And because we're not clear in our communication around it, then we start to feel resentful because now they're asking or they're putting more on us and we don't have the capability of pushing back in such a way. So we take on more, and then starts this whole cycle. So what we're truly lacking oftentimes is the communication skills required to assist our people-pleasing saboteur. And when you know how to start communicating boundaries, it's revolutionary, but it's not something that we are taught. We're not taught this as children. In fact, most of us were never allowed to say no. If your parent came and asked you, hey, I need you to go and do this, take out the trash, go do this, go do that, you're not, hey, I'll get to this later, I'm doing this right now. Most of the time, the expectation was that you were going to do it at that time. It had to be done right then and there. And so you dropped everything because you did not want to be disrespectful. You did not want to get into trouble. So how many of us carry around our childhood reactions, our assumptions into our present day interactions with our boss, with our colleagues, with our stakeholders, with our spouse? And we just start saying yes to everything because we don't want to seem or appear disrespectful, or that we don't care, or that, we're not doing a good job. We have to start to consider, how do we communicate this differently? In actuality, when we start to ask those questions, when we can communicate better, we are not only being respectful to ourselves, but to the people that we've made prior commitments to the organization, to the other things that we have already said that we would fulfill. And we're guarding that. We are safeguarding. And that did probably become very clear to me even until I started to lead my team, until I started to recognize that it was so much more than me. It was so much beyond me. And I needed to safeguard our team so that we could follow through on the priorities and the projects. I couldn't say yes to everything because my people pleasing could inadvertently affect the team and our ability to make progress. This topic is so tightly coupled when I'm working with clients with time management. And it's probably one of the number one challenges that most of my clients face where we're hemming and hawing about decisions that we have to make. We're trying to, put greater meaning to the actions that we're taking. We have a plethora of meetings, and we place greater importance on either being present or dropping everything when someone asks us to, or fitting that extra thing in. And we really wonder why we are feeling frazzled or distraught or less productive, or our creativity is lacking. And we're feeling a greater amount of stress and burnout. And while it is true that companies do expect a lot of us, and that there might be a lot more meetings than, it's kind of unprecedented, but there's a lot more meetings. You need to ask, how are you effectively negotiating your time, your capacity, and your priorities? If you're saying yes to everything, you really aren't leading. I want you to think about that. If you're saying yes to everything, you aren't leading. You aren't challenging. You aren't questioning. You aren't negotiating. You aren't thinking critically. You aren't doing all of these other things that are required of a leader, or required of a business owner or an entrepreneur or whomever has goals or priorities in their lives. And so it's hard for us to further those priorities and those goals if we just keep piling more and more and more sand onto our shoulders, or our teams, or even our company. Because the more that we say yes, the more that we're piling on, the less critically that we're thinking about what's being asked of us and what's within our capacity to do so, what's within our energy economy, the less we are able to lead effectively. And so you're wondering, why do I feel buried right now? Why do I feel buried under so much pressure? And thus is the cycle of the people pleaser. But the more that you can start to get out from underneath that and respect yourself, respect what it is that you bring, respect your time, the greater respect that you will also demonstrate to those around you, to your team, the better example that you will be leading by, and also helping your teams, your organization, to truly do the work that is most important. Just like in the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown, not everything can be a priority one. When you have all priorities ones, you have no priorities. You have no strategic planning if everything is in there. I used to work for a company where a strategic planning was literally asking every team to create a list of everything that they wanted to accomplish that year, put it into a larger spreadsheet, and those were all of our priorities. We had over 100 priorities. That's not a strategy. That's not a planning session. That's not understanding what our true north is and our vision and how we're enacting this mission going forward. And same for your personal goals. Same for all of those things that you have set out that you wanted to accomplish for yourself personally, in your leadership, in your life, whatever that looks like. If we're always trying to people please and worrying about what everyone else thinks, we're doing such a disservice to ourselves, and it's the detriment of our own progress and our own success. And yet the flip side is that it's actually not helping us. People aren't happier with us when we say yes to everything. People don't actually like us more when we throw guilt trips around and we feel resentful and we feel like we're so bogged down because we are incapable of standing up for ourselves. So do the work. Do that deeper inner work. Recognize where it stems from inside of you so that you aren't blaming other people, and that you can take responsibility for your life, your actions, your priorities, and how you can best show up and be successful as the leader that you are, because it is in there. And you can flip that saboteur over, because you have all of the other skills of love and empathy and compassion that's necessary for leaders of this day and age. once we start to know how to prioritize and set healthy boundaries. I hope this was helpful. I'd love to hear your insights. Do you struggle with people pleasing? Is this something that you have faced in the past? How was this for you? Did it bring any, moments for you where you were like, oh, that's it, that clicks for me? It's not rocket science, but sometimes we have to dig a little bit deeper. We have to look at what's truly happening within before we can go outward. And once we do, that's where we're able to shine the greatest. That's where we're able to make the most progress. That's where we can make the greatest impact in the work that we do and in other people's lives as well. Thank you so much for joining me. We have some amazing guests who are coming on. I'm so excited to start sharing them with you. We're booking up and filling up in the podcast. If you're interested in coming onto the show, reach out to me. You can find me at Jessica at the Hello You Show. And we can see, what kind of insights do you have that you would like to share? What types of experiences have you faced? Have you overcome challenges or trauma or things in your life that enabled you to learn and then grow from it? Because that's what this show is all about. So thank you again for joining me today. And I look forward to having you join us in the next few weeks. Enjoy your day. Thank you for tuning into the Hello You Show. It's been a pleasure to have you with us on this journey today. If you found value in our conversation and want to support the show, please take a moment to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also deeply appreciate it if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us grow, but also enables others seeking inspiration and authenticity to discover our community. Until next time, keep embracing your story with purpose.